Short questions, short answers by Torah teacher Ariel and E-Bible. Copyright Tetzei Torah Ministries 2015. All rights reserved. Okay, I got an interesting question for you tonight. What is a Gentile? Sounds pretty straightforward, huh? Well, let's see if we can find out an answer. I want to add a perspective to this answer that I feel was not yet covered in many of the answers that we find on E-Bible. Allow me to develop a background and then work towards my main point. It is true that from a simplistic Jewish perspective, all the world, since the times of the patriarchs, is now basically divided into Jews and Gentiles. In the times of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, Israel, the people, started out as direct descendants of the man called Jacob, or Israel, while those not legally related to Jacob were referred to in the text as foreigners, or aliens, or strangers, or sometimes sojourners. Often the word used to describe these non-Jacobites was goy, an all-purpose, non-judgmental word, designating one from the nations, with implications that they were other than Israel. Related to goy is the word ger, often used to designate a stranger from the nations. To be sure, the contrasting Hebrew word Ezrach often indicated native-born sons of Jacob. The word Gentile was not supposed to be an emotionally charged term, but by the 1st century, history and the rabbinic writings attest to its normal use among Jews to designate pagans, heathen, idol worshippers, etc. By this time, instead of merely indicating those from the nations, some religious Jews viewed anyone who was a Gentile with suspect, supposing that surely those Gentiles could not inherit heaven the way Jews could. In practical everyday matters, Gentiles were thought to transmit ritual impurity to Jews seeking to remain ritually pure, and these Gentiles were often accused of leading Jews into idolatry when close relations were formed. It is no wonder a shared social animosity and hostility developed between Jews and Gentiles, prompting Paul to pen his famous words in Ephesians 2:14 through 16 about the dividing wall of hostility, thereby killing hostility, etc. Since I normally move in and around Messianic circles, it's not uncommon for me to hear Gentiles attracted to Torah refer to themselves as, quote, no longer Gentiles, end quote, but now as, quote, spiritual Jews, end quote, in some way. Many times they base this on Paul's words found earlier on in this passage. Let's look at Ephesians 2:11. Therefore, remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands, end quote. Now, their logic infers that since Paul essentially calls these Gentiles from the nations former Gentiles, that they must not be Gentiles any longer now that they have joined the commonwealth of Israel, per Ephesians 2:19, and indeed have been grafted into Remnant Israel, per Romans 11:17 through 19. But to make this verse mean Gentile Christians are no longer Gentiles is confusing and unnecessary for two reasons as I see it. Number one, Paul will spend a significant amount of time in his letters championing Jewish and Gentile equality in Christ, with the express purpose of repudiating the 1st century mistaken socio-religious belief that all Jews and only Jews can become genuine covenant members in Israel and be counted as saved. On the contrary, Gentiles as Gentiles are now children of Abraham. Read Romans 4:9 through 12. And number two, more to the point on a linguistic and hermeneutic level, Paul is simply stating to these Gentile Christians that they are no longer pagans, heathen, idol worshippers, etc., and that in Messiah they need to leave that bankrupt lifestyle behind and put on the new life in Christ as Gentile Christians. I'll close with this foundational quote from Ephesians 4:17 through 24, and it's been truncated due to lack of space here. Quote, now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God. But that is not the way you learned Christ. Put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God, in true righteousness and holiness. Head on out to iTunes and check out my podcasts that are available there. You can search for my podcast under the name Ariel HaNavi. And while you're at it, head on over to YouTube and check out my YouTube channel with all its videos. Make sure you hit the little notification bell to make sure you're receiving notifications because I upload new content weekly, even sometimes daily.